Hi everyone, welcome to Motorsport Muse, and this edition is about the greatest duel in F1 history. This was a 1979 French Grand Prix. We're going to look at the final 3 laps, really kind of digest what was happening and why this was such a kind of pivotal moment in F1. And the 2 drivers, of course, are Gilles Villeneuve and Rene Arnoux. So for those of you that don't know the backstory to this race, it was really a big fight between Renault and Ferrari. Now at the time, obviously Ferrari were very well established. Their star driver, Jody Scheckter, was really vying with Gilles Villeneuve for the championship. Villeneuve was very new to the sport. He'd started in '77 for McLaren. He'd had a career before that in Formula Atlantic in North America, and before that, believe it or not, he was a snowmobile racer and won multiple titles. And Enzo Ferrari picked him up because he really wanted a North American driver for the 78 season to help with the car sales. 78, he won the Canadian Grand Prix, but he was a little bit erratic and had a big crash at Fuji in the Japanese Grand Prix when he actually took off over the back of Patrick Depaille's Tyrrell, and fortunately he killed a few spectators who were stood in the runoff area. But by the time 79 came around, it kind of calmed his temperament down, although his driving style was still very exuberant. Now at Renault, you had 2 drivers, Rene Arnoux and Jean-Pierre Jabouille. Now Jabouille was with Renault from the start. So they also came in 1977 to F1, and they really pioneered the turbocharged F1 engine. So turbochargers had been around in IndyCar and Can-Am and GT racing touring cars before, but never in Formula 1. And Renault spotted a loophole which said in the regulations you could have 1.5 litre supercharged engines, so they interpreted that as also turbocharged. So they developed this car, and initially the British press dubbed it the yellow teapot because it used to just spend a lot of time steaming. But by the time 79 came around, they'd really got to grips with the reliability, the throttle control. There was still turbo lag, but nothing like what they had in 77. And by the time they came to the French Grand Prix in 79, they introduced a new car, the RS10, which was a full ground effect car to really take the fight to Ferrari. Now, as a reminder, ground effects was quite prominent in F1 at the time, and it was the art of sculpting the underside of the side pods up, so you generated pressure under the car which sucked the car to the ground. Slightly different from the wings that you see today. Wings push the car in, a diffuser or a Venturi will suck the car in, and the Renault was perfect for that because it had a tiny little V6 1.5 litre engine, so they just didn't have a huge engine in the middle of the car, so they could really get wide Venturi tunnels. Ferrari, on the other hand, was still using this big flat 12 3 litre engine which was a lot wider, so they couldn't get the same width tunnels. The Ferrari probably had a little bit more horsepower. It certainly had better throttle control, but they were fairly evenly matched. And at the French Grand Prix, actually, Villeneuve was leading the race for about the first 40 laps until Jabouille overtook him, and then this huge battle erupted in the last 3 laps for second place. And then the other driver in this battle was Rene Arnoux. So Rene started through kind of traditional European motorsports through Formula 2. He got an ELF kind of scholarship, which a lot of the French drivers in the 1970s did. ELF Fuel would kind of sponsor them through, and he was placed in the Renault team. And Arnoux was, I quite liked Arnoux because he was a little bit in the shadow of Alain Prost, who was a really polished driver, but Arnoux his style was like very hunched at the wheel. His head used to be forward. He'd be attacking all the time, and if there was any driver that was going to take it to Villeneuve, it was Arnoux. So this first clip is about 3 laps before the end, and this is where Arnoux is kind of reeling in Villeneuve, and he gets him into turn 1, a really nice slipstream, really late on the brakes. Villeneuve tries to stick with him, but you can see the writings on the wall, and you half expect, Villeneuve's just going to sit back then and settle for 3rd, but it's not quite how it panned out. But let's watch this first clip.
Et cette lutte pour la 2e place. Alors cette fois Arnoux colle vraiment. Ah non, tout de même, il y a 5-6 mètres. L'aspiration va jouer maintenant. Va-t-il sortir? Oui, il sort. Il sort. Va-t-il passer? Ah, les 2 voitures vont se toucher. C'est incroyable. Côte à côte tout le virage. Et finalement Arnoux 2e, fantastique. extraordinaire. On dirait vraiment qu'Arnoux a 10 ans de métier pour faire ce qu'il a fait. C'est prodigieux.
So into the penultimate lap, and as you can see when we play it, Arnoux is comfortably in second place. He's got quite a big lead coming out onto the final corner, but somehow Villeneuve, despite getting a really big kick of oversteer on the exit of the final corner, gets in a slipstream. It comes up behind him. I think Arnoux was suffering from some kind of fuel vaporization or fuel feed issue. Wasn't quite getting full power, but nevertheless, into turn one, there wasn't really a move on, if I'm honest, but somehow Villeneuve went up the inside, locked all 4 tyres and made it stick through the inside. And then even through turn one, he got this beautiful drift going, and that was typical of Villeneuve. Even when there wasn't a move that was on, he still did it. And then he throws in some opposite lock just to kind of settle it. And it's very reminiscent of a modern move, you know, from someone like Daniel Ricciardo, who'll just, as he says, lick the stamp and send it, just barrel into the inside with the hope that the driver in front's going to make space, and that's what Villeneuve did, and it was unheard of in the 1970s. So let's play this one.
C'est encore l'angoisse, car maintenant il faut tenir 5 tours. Regazzoni, lui, pour sa part, est revenu dans le tour de tête. Regazzoni a repassé Jabouille qui très sagement lève le pied avec Villeneuve qui attaque de nouveau Arnoux. Mais c'est incroyable. Et Villeneuve de nouveau deuxième. Vous avez vu ce freinage incroyable. Villeneuve de nouveau deuxième. Avec Villeneuve qui a complètement allumé ses roues. Regardez ça. Il le prend, allume ses 4 roues et passe au freinage de René Arnoux qui s'est laissé surprendre. Alors de nouveau Villeneuve deuxième.
So onto the final clip and the penultimate lap, or starting the last lap rather. So basically here, Arnoux fighting back again, and Villeneuve is trying to defend, but what happens then is probably the greatest half lap of F1 history in my opinion. So they're basically side by side throughout the entire lap. They're banging wheels, they're sliding. Arnoux is off the track at one point. They go up to the hairpin halfway around the lap, and somehow Villeneuve sticks it up the inside again and goes through and ends up finishing second. Now, the reason why I think this whole sequence is special and almost like a turning point in F1 is, up until that point, drivers didn't race like this. This style of racing is very reminiscent of what you see today, where if a driver makes a mistake, he's got a car parked, space runoff to go off into. At Dijon, as you'll see, it was either shrubland on the exit, like literally nothing but bushes, or there's Armco, and you saw what happened with Grosjean. And my views on Armco aren't great. You wouldn't want to hit that. And also there was catch fencing, which used to be basically poles in the ground with wire mesh, and it used to stop the cars, but what it actually did was it hit the drivers on the head with the poles, and it would wrap the car in wire mesh. And the other thing, the cars were, late 70s, still very dangerous. They were made out of aluminium. The drivers sat really far forward for the optimum weight distribution, but that meant that their legs were out in front of the front wheels, so there was no crumple zone other than their ankles, and there was fuel everywhere, so the cars used to burst into flames. So to race as hard as these two are racing, it really didn't happen, and as I said, it's almost 40 years ahead of its time. So let's play the clip anyway.
Il doit rester 2 tours, 3 tours, on ne sait plus trop ici. Et Jabouille entre dans son dernier tour. Dernier tour pour Jabouille. Alors est-ce que Arnoux va sortir? Oui, Arnoux attaque. Non, il n'arrivera pas, oui, car Villeneuve a bloqué ses roues. Mais c'est fou, ils vont se toucher bientôt. Et Arnoux passe. Ils sont côte à côte. C'est incroyable! Arnoux va sortir! Ils sont fous! C'est de la folie ce dernier tour! Ils se touchent, chaque qui mieux. Attention, Arnoux deuxième, c'est de la folie! Et Arnoux deuxième, mais Villeneuve le reprend! Ils vont se sortir! Ils sont passés 2 fois dans ce dernier tour. Et Villeneuve deuxième encore. Mais quelle bagarre invraisemblable. Avantage pour Villeneuve, on oublie presque Arnoux qui va, Jabouille qui va placer la ligne incessamment. Mais maintenant les deux voitures vont passer. Et Jabouille gagne. Victoire de Jean-Pierre Jabouille. Attention pour la deuxième place. Qui sera second? Je crois que ce sera Villeneuve. Avec Arnoux à côté de lui, je pense. Villeneuve deuxième. Villeneuve deuxième.
So the race ended and it was Jean-Pierre Jabouille who won. Gilles Villeneuve second, Rene Arnoux third, and it was a shame for Jabouille because the only thing that anyone ever talks about is now the second place battle. Jabouille developed that car, his first ever win. He was French at the French Grand Prix. Renault's first ever win, the first win for a turbocharged engine. But the headline of the race was the final 3 laps for second place. And it was really kind of a pivotal moment as well in Villeneuve's career because although he was known to be quite erratic and, you know, pull these amazing moves, it showed that he could drive like that but keep it on the road and get a result. And he arguably became the driver of the kind of late 70s, early 80s. And, you know, if he was killed at the Belgian Grand Prix qualifying in 82, I'm almost certain he would have ended up at McLaren and would have gone on to win multiple titles. Rene Arnoux, this kind of helped launch his career because he raced for Renault until the end of 82. He had quite a difficult season as Prost's teammate that year. And then when Villeneuve was killed, he actually went to Ferrari for 83. And one of the reasons Enzo Ferrari gave him the drive was because he saw how he battled with Villeneuve at this French Grand Prix. And the other reason why this is just such an important race is, I think just because of the style of racing suddenly erupted. And you wouldn't probably see this style of racing again really until the kind of late 80s when Ayrton Senna was on the scene. But you wouldn't have cars wheel banging, going off the circuit, lunges. It just never happened. And the other thing, it was just an amazing final few laps. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'll do another one of these types of videos again at some point in the future. I wanted to do a top 10 greatest overtakes video, but there's some issues with copyright on YouTube, so I can't use some of the clips. So who knows, I might do a couple of those if I can at some point. But anyway, hope you've had a great Christmas. Hope you have a really great new year, and we will speak again soon.